I work on language documentation. Right now, I'm working on a language called Kala in Papua New Guinea that I've been working on since 2017. And one of the main features of the language that I've been documenting is its phonology. And we also had to come up with a writing system for the language before that could be done. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about those aspects of language documentation and going over what phonology is, what you'll need to know about it to work on to start documenting your language, and also some of the aspects of orthography or the writing system of the language. So we'll be talking about those today, and then I'll be available here to answer any questions that you guys may have. I'll just wait a little bit more and see if anybody else pops up. A few more people joining. Hi, Anna. So see how good it is. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a little closer.
This keeps getting interrupted, but I think yours is fine.
Okay. Okay.
I think we can get started.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I'll just get started then with the beginning. In case anybody wants to watch it later, it won't go away. So for the objectives of this, this is not going to be getting into any phonological theory. This is just for the purposes of working on describing the language. One of the other goals here is to understand the concept of a language-specific sound system. Not all sounds in all languages, but how sounds work within the context of a particular language. And also another goal is to go over orthography, so written down how that system works, practical aspects of that type of system, and how you can best represent the sound system of your particular language with writing. So first off, what is phonology? One of the basic aspects of phonology is the sound inventory of a particular language. That is the list of all the sounds that are considered contrastive for that language. So even though there may be variations, for example, of a T sound or a T-like sound, individual languages may consider those differences important or not important. So something that speakers of the language consider to be a unique sound is something that we would consider a contrastive element of that language. Consonants are sounds that restrict the airflow through your mouth and nose, and vowels shape and change the airflow, but don't usually restrict it as much as a consonant. An important aspect of this concept is that a sound is not the same thing as a letter. A letter is something in the written language, something that you will see, whereas a sound is something completely different. It's something to do with the spoken language. You may have a sound that has two or more letters that correspond to it, and you may have a letter that corresponds to two or more sounds. So often in many writing systems, they're not a perfect one-to-one representation of the sounds. You'll have a mismatch. So that can be a little bit confusing, but generally the idea is that these two things are not the same. Sounds are separate from letters. So some examples in English, which is kind of, I think, infamous for being a little bit hard to read because of the different inconsistencies that do exist. There's an example of this poem where you have different ways of spelling the exact same sound. So it says, "Oh, you English-speaking people, with your C's and T's and steeple." So here we have the E sound, but it's being spelled in three completely different ways, with EI, EA, and EE, but it's all just the E sound. So this is a good example of something that is a single sound, but maps onto several different letter sequences. With your C's and T's and steeple, with your U and who and glue. Bunch of different ways to write it. Torment your Tom and Terry with your misspelled bomb and berry. With your go and foe and dough, your so and toe and no. Come and dumb and home and foam, torn and worn and tomb and comb. Sir and purr and fur and myrrh, still we keep our eye and guy, our much and touch, our whole and bowl, our flower and ewer, our coal and soul. So here's a bunch of examples of situations where you have either the same sound represents sounds. So for example, here you have much and touch, which rhyme, which are the same sound, but they're either represented by a U or an OU in the case of touch. So this kind of demonstrates how sounds don't always equal letters and vice versa. So to sort of get through your head the difference between sounds and letters, sometimes it can help to say words backwards, but not by their letter, but by their sound. So it's tempting to read by letter rather than sound because letters are what we read. But if you look at the following words, you will notice that some of them sound the same forwards and backwards, but they don't necessarily look the same forwards and backwards. So if you take the word shush and wrote it backwards, you wouldn't start with an S anymore, it would start with an H. But if you said it backwards, just considering the sounds, sh, and sh again, it really comes out to be the same thing, shush. Same. The three sounds, M, E, and you just get meme again. So kind of a nice exercise is to look at the following words in English and think about how many individual sounds are in the following words. It's easy to count the letters, but you have to listen in order to figure out how many sounds are in them. So the word see is spelled using three letters, but it consists of just two sounds, S and E. So even though we've got three letters, we have just two sounds. For the word stick, you have five letters, but you don't have five sounds. The CK sequence makes a single sound, K. So you have four sounds instead of five letters. Mix is a little bit the opposite. Mix has its final letter really represents two sounds. If you pronounce the word mix, the X is like a K and an S sound. So if you were to count the sounds, you would probably say that mix has four sounds. Two letters represent one sound. So for good, you have two O's, which make a single sound, So if you're going to count the sounds rather than letters, you would have to say that good has three sounds, G, and D, good. So something that's extremely useful in figuring all of this type of stuff out and keeping it straight and not mixing up letters with sounds is the IPA. And the IPA stands for the International Phonetic Alphabet. So it's an alphabet used to write sounds specifically. There are no extra letters like there sometimes are in the spelling systems of various languages. There's one letter to each sound. So you get a one-to-one correspondence. It's a consistent way of representing sounds. So there's nothing extra and there's nothing left out either. The nice thing about the IPA is that once you know what sounds in the language, you should be able to read it and know exactly from those symbols and letters how to pronounce it, which is not always the case with other alphabets or writing systems that we'll see in various languages. It's kind of like musical notation in this. This point. This is the chart of the consonants for the International Phonetic Alphabet, and it's arranged with rows and columns, and the columns represent the place of articulation. And what that means is where in your mouth are you actually making the sound? For example, the bilabial column, where you see M and P and B, is literally lips. As you go farther back along the chart, it goes farther back in the mouth, considering that the lips are the farthest forward place that you can articulate any sounds. Each column going back to the right goes farther back in your mouth until you get all the way over here at glottal, which is the glottis, which is in the back of your throat, down in your mouth, where you can articulate the h sound. It's not very strongly articulated, but it is in there. Now the rows represent different if you have a sound that stops all airflow, that doesn't let any airflow out, like P, T, bat. You're saying T, you can't let any airflow out until after you stop saying it. So these types of sounds, for example, are called plosives or stops. So this is the plosive row, which just shows you the different ways that you can make consonants that stop all airflow. Trickier than consonants because you can make any type of vowel sound. There's no like boundaries really on vowels. You can shape your mouth in pretty much any way, and as long as there's enough air flowing through, you'll get some sort of vowel. This is generally called the vowel space here. This is also known as the vowel trapezoid, just because of its shape. And up here with closed front vowels, you have vowels that where your tongue is pushed all the way forward in your mouth, and your mouth itself is not opened very wide. So like E is represented by this symbol, by the I. E, your tongue is all the way forward in your mouth. It's pushed up to the front. And your mouth is pretty much closed. It's not open. So this front closed vowel is E. And then as you open your mouth more and more, the vowels go from closed to open. So down here we have A, where my mouth is much more open. Likewise, when my tongue pulls farther back into my mouth, you go from front to back vowel. So E, all the way back here. My tongue is no longer in the front for E, but it's in the back for U. You may notice also that these symbols come in pairs. There's two here, two there. is you round your lips while you're saying it. So to say an oo, which is this sound here, you have to round your lips. Ooh. You also round your lips, but you do make your mouth a little bit more open. So whenever you see these vowels on the right does have lip